Good morning. It's Allan Frame speaking, President and CEO of Beyond Minerals, Inc. It's been a while since we've had a GeoChat. We're overdue, but I'll just briefly give you a little preamble and tell you why it took us so long to get episode 1 out for season 2. A couple of years ago, Lawrence and I decided that the lithium space was not the right place to be, at least 100%. So we divested of a lot of the properties we had. But one time we were the largest landowner of exploration lithium properties in Ontario. But with a land position like that comes the big problem is paying for them, just paying the services, let alone doing any exploration work. And the bottom fell out of the lithium market, as everyone knows. So we decided to do a pivot. And we decided we'd pivot into copper, number one, because of it's familiarity. Everybody's familiar with copper, and it's a product in great need. And number two, rare earths. We had an eye on some rare earths properties that were unavailable for several decades. So we picked those up. We dropped all but one lithium property, which is Ear Falls in Ontario, which is an advanced property, which has a drilling permit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We just completed a work program there, and we're waiting for some results. We picked up a property we call the Rare near Fairmont in British Columbia, which hosts various, originally was a lead zinc target, but it's got various and assorted rare earths associated with it. We've done a small program there that we're waiting for results from. And the one that I'm especially impressed with is Owl Creek near Pemberton in British Columbia, which is a copper property, copper with some gold. I'm very excited about that particular project. Owl Creek and rare properties are unencumbered properties, meaning there are no royalties, there are no prospector payments, there's nothing. We own those in their entirety, thanks to the likes of Graeme Evans, who is quite the sleuth at finding properties that have been overlooked or just not looked at all for a long period of time. So I think we're now finally positioned to have some meaningful exploration and deliver some meaningful returns to shareholders. So that's what's got us to today. We're very excited to be doing this GeoChat, and hopefully once you've watched and listened to it, you will be as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Allan, and welcome everyone to GeoChat Season 2, Episode 1. I'm Jason. I manage communications for Beyond Minerals, and joining Allan and I is Lawrence Tsang, VP of Exploration, and Graeme Evans, Senior Geologist for the company. Beyond Minerals on July 23rd released a major update on the Owl Creek project entitled Beyond Observes Extensive Malachite Mineralization at Owl Creek Site Visit. And investors are eager to understand the significance of what the team observed on site. Let's explore the highlights from each of your perspectives. And section 1 is back to you, Allan, which is the CEO perspective. And I have 2 questions for you, please. Number 1 is, you mentioned in the news release that the site visit strengthened your confidence in the scale and quality of the Owl Creek system. From a big picture perspective, and recognizing that copper is at a historic highs of $6.50 a pound, what makes Owl Creek a compelling value driver for Beyond overall asset portfolio right now?
Thank you for that question. A good way to start out the GeoChat for sure. Well, number one, as I had mentioned in the opening, this property is unencumbered. So, that gives us a bit of an advantage right off the top. And number two, this property has never been extensively explored, although it's had some work in the past. For example, we know that the area is copper gold bearing, and nobody's ever tested for gold. So I think worst case scenario, we can enhance oil grades by adding in whatever gold value we manage to obtain. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason is its accessibility. It's a short drive from Vancouver and about 30 minutes out of Pemberton itself. So it's easy access with logging roads. It's very good, but most importantly, the recent trip to the area, which Lawrence and Graeme and Paul Baxter just returned from, showed us some really interesting surface mineralization called malachite, which is normally associated. In fact, I'll read you the definition. It's an ore pathfinder. It forms in the upper oxidized zones of copper veins, meaning bright green outcroppings, signaling subsurface copper. So in an area that really, to the best of our knowledge, hadn't even been walked before, we've got this, glaring neon sign saying, "Hey, dig here." So not only is it accessible and it'll be very affordable, and it's unencumbered, but it's in an element that everybody needs a lot. For example, I had an article forwarded to me this morning by a friend and a shareholder of mine. This article is written by John Newell, and I quote, Goldman Sachs increased the forecast for 2026 refined copper outside of the U.S. by more than tenfold, from 60,000 tons to 640,000 tons. And he goes on to say in this article, British Columbia is increasingly positioning itself as Canada's copper capital. Why major producers are investing billions of dollars in the province. And last but not least, geography may prove to be just important as geology. So this kind of just fits everything. It's exciting. We've had one small program that we've already done. We have another one that's going to start soon. And optimistically, we'll be poking some holes into this thing by the end of this year. So very sweet property. Of the three, they're all good, mind you, but this one to me seems to be the most exciting and easily accessible. So those are the reasons why Owl Creek, I think, will outshine the others, although I'd be happy if they all shined equally.
Thanks, Allan. That explanation was very insightful in addressing question 2, which was the logistics about being close to Pemberton, 30 minutes away, and having direct access to logging roads. Are there any further comments on that, or should I proceed with Lawrence?
I think I'd proceed with Lawrence because the excitement lies in the geology and what has been discovered there recently, and what type of future potential there is. And I'm a bystander like all the rest of the shareholders when it comes to that. I'm not a geologist, so I think we should pass it over to the people that truly understand the rocks and learn something from them.
Sure, sounds good, and I'll come back to you again shortly. So we'll move to section 2, the system scale and technical confidence, and I'll proceed with you, Lawrence, our VP of Exploration. I have 3 questions. And the first one, the team has confirmed extensive surface malachite mineralization, particularly within Zone C. For non-geologists, what does observing widespread surface copper like this tell you about the strength and potential of the hydrothermal system? And so, and within that question, Zone C is interpreted as 1,000 meters long and 300 meters wide and still open. How significant is this?
Thank you, Jason, and it's great to be here for another episode. And what really struck us the most was that extensive malachite mineralization when we got to site, and when we were standing along the road looking down at the canyon, we could right away spotted quite a few different patches of malachite mineralization. That was really exciting. And when we started walking around there and then start breaking more rocks, we actually saw more malachite mineralization. And that's really put it in a really simple and straightforward concept, is that there's copper in the system and it's coming right to surface. And in order to get that amount of malachite mineralization, I see you require a long time of weathering of a large amount of copper sulfides underneath or around to really generate that. So it really indicates a large system. So we are really working on not a small targets. We are looking at a more district scale system. And Zone C, I think, is a great starting point for Beyond, really to start exploring and working in the porphyry copper space. For Zone C being currently just kilometers by 300 meter wide, it's a good start. It's a good size target. And we are seeing that potential of the other zones as well, zones A, B, D, and also zones E. And we are already throwing ideas that Zone D could be part of Zone C as well. So we could easily expand the footprint of Zone C with more systematic mapping and sampling in upcoming futures. And I think we are not exploring something small or something isolated. We are exploring for a well-developed copper system with a larger scale potential here.
And within the news release, it mentions vectoring towards the potassic alteration zone, where the best copper grades usually sit. Could you explain a little bit more about that and why it is important?
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of us, or a lot of people out there have seen that generic porphyry model, that alteration zonations. You're talking about all this technical term from porphyritic to phyllic to potassic alteration. And when I look at it, putting in a more simple terms, will be looking at a temperatures profiles from a cooler part to the hotter part of the systems, which is the potassic, and also from a that perspective from the shallow part close to the surface to the potential deeper part of the system, which is the potassic zones. And why do we talk about that? Because generally, in porphyry system in the potassic area, you could see stronger stockwork veinings, and so it leads to more consistent mineralizations and grade. And for us, the important part why we are talking about vectoring ourselves to the potassic zone is that we were able to observe that chloride epithermal alteration to the east side, and then when we are at zone Cs, we have seen that phyllic alterations, that sericite silica alterations, showing that we could be just entering and exploring at the fringe, at the outside of the system. We haven't got to the core part of the system. That really opens up our potential and showing the size of the system. Where is it at that, or is it to the west side or the southwest side? That's something with more work from mappings and sample that we plan to do in the next couple of months. I think will allow us to really have a good understanding of the system to really come up with good targets for follow-up and potential drill targetings in the upcoming months.
Well, thanks, Lawrence. And this next question is regarding drill targets, which you just mentioned. And historical drilling at Owl Creek dates back to 1971, and you've successfully relocated those original drill sites. How does obtaining this historical data position Beyond Minerals to establish drill-ready targets quicker?
Yeah, before we got to the site this season, we able to collect a lot of old assessment work and old data, maps, and reports. And we've done a lot of, we spent a lot of time and work to digitize and to reference a lot of the work, and we overlay everything. But the most important thing is to validate and to give us the confidence that, hey, we could rely on this data. So we got to the site, we pull out all the reports, different maps. And the really nice thing is that most of the roads on the trails on the historical maps, we could still find them on when we visit the site. So that gives us the confidence that we could rely on those high quality work that was done before. And so that really gives beyond that head start and major advantage to explore Owl Creek. We are not starting from scratch. We had a lot of good quality work being done before, so give us that really baseline fundamental to work on, to build. And we are not just working on one small target of zone Cs. We actually have multiple targets that we could follow up on, zones A, B, C, D, and E. It spanned over a 10-kilometer trend, and all zones has historical work. And now we've been to zone Cs. We validate those historical work to be good and accurate. Now we really have that data set to really build on and to expand, and we hopefully we could explore and develop a much larger scale system here at Owl Creek.
Thank you for those thorough explanations, Lawrence. And before I move on to Graeme, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think this is very exciting to us, and between Graeme, Paul, and I, we went there. We visited the site, and after the visit, we're really excited with all the great geological fundamental we could observe from the field, from not just the malachite mineralization, also the pervasive alteration, consistent mineralization that we could see from zone C. So that gives us that really good starting point, and we believe with a lot of similarity between the soil geochem and some of the old geophysics that was done before the signature between the different zones give us the confidence that, hey, we could have similar things that building up at A, B, D, and E as well. So we do have a much larger scale footprint here than just a couple isolated smaller pockets here. So that really excites us about our creek.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. I'll move on to section 3, which is geologist perspective, field observations and system complexity. And this is with Graeme Evans, our senior geologist for Beyond Minerals. And good morning, Graeme. I have 3 questions for you, Graeme. And the first one is, you spent significant time examining Zone C. What stood out to you during the site visit?
Yeah, thanks. Lawrence has already explained a fair amount of it, but I'll repeat it with a bit of geofantasy to it. We didn't know what to expect when we arrived there, Jason. We've got the historical information, but the description of mineralization and alteration is very weak. So we had no idea what we were walking into. And it can't get much better than standing there and seeing malachite stain all over, saying you've got copper mineralization all over the place. And as we've got down into the creek valley, which is great exposure, the malachite is extremely widespread. I don't think I've ever seen that much malachite in a system before. And so, I mean, it's just a positive telling you you've got copper mineralization all over. But going to that a little further, the mineralization is clearly in at least 2 different styles. We see fracture-related copper mineralization, and that's quite common in BC porphyries. A lot of BC porphyries are just dependent on density of fractures with copper mineralization along the fracture, and you get enough density of the fractures to make an economic deposit. But what I found exciting at Owl Creek Zone C is there's also a lot of disseminated fine-grained copper in the phyllic alteration. So that really is going to improve your odds of, improves the grades and improves the consistency of your mineralization. And that's in tandem with the alteration we saw there. There's a lot of complex cross-cutting alteration patterns in the fractures. So you can see, quartz epidote or quartz chlorite overprinting sericite veins. It's showing it's a really strong, complex, multi-phase intrusive system. And then as we went to the south in Zone C, there's really intense phyllic alteration. And when I say intense, it's quartz sericite pyrite. We have a hard time actually telling what the original rock is. It's so blasted, and that has disseminated pyrite and chalcopyrite in it. So just for a first pass, seeing copper mineralization all over in a strong altered system, you can't get much better than that for a first visit.
Yeah, thanks for that, Graeme. And on your comment of first visit, my next question ties in. What would you like to accomplish next at Owl Creek?
Well, we're opening the gate here. I think it's going to start probably tomorrow. And Paul Baxter is going back there. What we're going to do is kind of a 2-pronged thing, and we'll see how far Paul gets in this round. But the obvious thing is to go back and map the alteration and mineralization in Zone C and collect representative rock samples of all the different phases and areas. And that gives you a double whammy. As Lawrence said, with the porphyry model, it's a fairly well-recognized, predictable system. Geologists are famous for our geologic models, but the porphyry model in particular is a good one. And with the mapping Paul can do and the rock sampling, we want to see predictable habit that will give us a vector towards the potassic alteration, which is your highest grade copper. And we get that both with the rock sampling and the alteration mapping. The other thing is there's not much historic information out of the data set for historical gold and silver, and I really suspect this thing is going to have gold and silver in it. And I'll put a caveat on that. I'm not looking for ore grade gold coming out of this. If we get 50 ppb gold in this cooler, weaker part of the system, I'll be tickled with that, because that, the gold values will come up significantly when we get towards the potassic area. So I'm quite excited about that. Then the second part of what I'm hoping we get done this time, if not this time, the next time, is, as Lawrence said, we're not just a one target porphyry system here. We have at least 5 porphyry targets, and we're in a cluster of porphyries here. There's probably a really big magma chamber underneath the whole Owl Creek Valley, and these guys are all related. There's stocks coming out of a big magma chamber, so there's probably a strong relationship between all 5, and there may be more of these systems out there because the exploration isn't that strong. But just for example, right now I'm tickled with what we have on Zone C, and it's a really good, valid drill target. We have the most information on it. But for example, the historical information says Zone A is stronger mineralization than C, so we would like to get down there for a first pass look at it. And then Zones D and E have a much bigger surface footprint than the other zones. So we just need the first pass here to start ranking these targets.
Thanks, Graeme. And a third question, it ties nicely into your comments on systems. It's a broader question, and the geologic setting for Owl Creek is contained within the Cascade Magmatic Arc, a 1,200-kilometer continental margin arc hosting numerous Miocene-aged porphyry copper moly and copper gold systems. For reference, what are some successful companies and mines within this corridor, and does early exploration at Owl Creek bring to mind any comparisons?
Yeah, you just gave me a loaded question there, Jason. So the Cascade Magmatic Arc, if you ask actually most geologists, let alone most people, they're going to draw a blank look at you. It's not all that well known, particularly in BC, but it's a long magmatic arc, and it's the youngest arc in BC. It's much more exposed down in California and Oregon and Washington state than it is in BC. There's just remnants and pieces of it, but it's an important system, and it's the youngest in the Cordilleran here. It started about 35 million years ago, and what it is it's the Pacific plates subducting underneath the continent, and where that subduction melts, you form these hydrous fluids that migrate up. And while we don't hear much about the Cascade Magmatic Arc, if I say to people the Ring of Fire, I think most people recognize that. This system started about 35 million years ago, but it's still happening today. All the young volcanoes, all the way from BC here, the Garibaldi complex that just sits west of Owl Creek, down through Mount Baker and Mount St. Helens and Shasta, all the way into Northern California, are the present day equivalent of the Cascade Arc. So there's probably porphyry deposits forming underneath some of those volcanoes right now, and it's still existing to this day. I mean, eruptions like Mount St. Helens were only 40 years ago. So this is an active plate system. Turning back to the Cascade Magmatic Arc, yeah, there's virtually nobody exploring in it these days. I could probably only list about a handful of companies presently exploring parts and pieces of it. There's a new company being formed on Mount Margaret down in Washington State that Alan, Lawrence, and I worked on. We're probably some of the few people that have seen Miocene porphyries in the last 15 years. But it's really a dormant area, and it's interesting that way because back in the 60s and 70s, the Cascade Arc was being heavily explored by a lot of the major copper companies of the day, and they came up with some real successes. Two that come to mind are Mount Margaret, that I think is going to be over 1 billion tons when they continue exploring. And then there's actually another one, Glacier Peak down in Washington State. It's 1.9 billion tons of good grade. But what happened is after the 60s and 70s exploration, in particular down in the US, a lot of these areas went dormant and have been converted to parks and wilderness area. And just, it's one of those belts that has fallen off the radar for the last 50 years, and people haven't come back to it. There's a huge influx of people exploring older arcs in BC, but we're literally one of a handful that's talking about the Cascade Magmatic Arc. In that regard, I do see, as I said, Alan, Lawrence, and I are some of the few that actually have seen these porphyry systems with our involvement with Mount Margaret. I do see a lot of similarities with Mount Margaret with the style of mineralization. These are calcalcaline systems, and they typically have copper with auxiliary moly, silver, gold in them, and they're really widespread, but it's an underexplored target in North America. The funny thing about it, though, is if we take a step back to the large scale on these things, the Ring of Fire goes all the way around the Pacific Ocean. It's a young arc system that's forming today. And if you step back and think about it, Miocene arcs are probably one of the biggest exploration targets globally. All the way through Ecuador, Peru, and Chile, most of the real big porphyry world-class deposits are in, half of them at least are in Miocene arc settings, similar to what we're looking at in the Cascade Arc. And I can rattle off top of the class, Escondida, El Teniente, El Abra, Kalahasi, they're all top 10 copper systems. They're all Miocene. And then ironically, over in the Philippines is Grasberg, which not only is a top 10 copper producer, it's one of the biggest gold deposits in the world. So really attractive targets globally, but nothing has been going on in the North American chunk. So that's got me quite excited for the upside.
Thanks for all those comments and those references to other successful companies and projects. Thanks, Graeme. And finally, I'm going to move on now to back to Alan, which will be section 4, which is what investors should watch for next. And a closing question for you, Alan. Looking ahead to the 2026 execution plan, Beyond Minerals is preparing a notice of work application for a potential diamond drilling program. What timeline should shareholders and potential investors watch for regarding upcoming field results, permits, and news flow, and anything else you'd like to add today?
Thank you, Jason. I appreciate that and those questions. Number one, I just like to say that we should have some really good news flow in the next while, because we have assay results coming from our other two properties, i.e. from Ear Falls, and we may have that within the next week or two, which would be another announceable event. We'll also have some results from some sampling we did at Rare Earths, which will be another announceable event. As Graeme alluded to, I think Paul Baxter will be back at Owl Creek Tuesday, and he'll be generating another news event. So I'd say we'll probably over the next couple of months have something to announce every couple of weeks, which I think will be, really good news flow for investors for sure. So I'm quite excited about that. I mean, this company, to answer your last part of the question, this company has had 2 years figuring out how to survive. Now we've acquired the properties of merit, largely unencumbered. And in fact, all of them unencumbered now because we've completed our deal on Ear Falls. So, we are now locked and loaded. So we're out of the survival mode and we're into the thriving mode. And I think these projects, Owl Creek in particular, could be an explosion for us. I'm very, very excited about it after we weren't dormant during that longer period of time, but it takes a long time to get out of things, to straighten things out, reorganize the company internally, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've accomplished all of that. We've got the projects, Owl Creek in particular. We're going to give it as much attention as it needs, as soon and as quick as we can do it. And I take a look at this situation, I think, with what we've just heard about Owl Creek alone, and I take a look at this company that has a market cap of about $3 million, I think, holy cow, this is ridiculous. I mean, the mining business is a risky business. Even when you're a miner, it's risky. Exploration is risky. People that are involved in exploration stocks know that. So if you're looking for something to risk with above average potential to give you a big bang for your buck, I think we meet the criteria in spades. So I'm extremely optimistic about everything that we've done. Thanks to the team that's on this call here today. It's our time to shine, and we're going to give it our very best in the field to make all that happen. So to all the existing shareholders, I thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for going through the leaner times. Those days are gone. It's turnaround time, boys. Let's have at it. And if anybody has any questions in particular, phone me up or phone Jason up, phone up any of us. I'm happy to talk about it. We're pretty proud of what we've accomplished in the last while. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for your closing remarks, Allan. And this brings us to the end of this GeoChat. Thank you, Allan, Lawrence, and Graeme. It's clear from today's discussion that Owl Creek is emerging as one of the most exciting early-stage porphyry opportunities in the Cascade Arc. We're energized here at Beyond Minerals at what we have seen, and we're committed to unlocking its full potential for our shareholders. Thank you.